Hello there. The results for the German elections are out, and we have some interesting results. Well, they're not completely out, but mostly enough for us to determine the winner, let's say. So, the German elections in 2021 were dominated by the SPD party. The color is red. You can see that they won the most votes in most of the countries. On the other hand, the results for the 2025 elections, black dominates the Western Germany part, that's the CDU, the center-right party, and blue, the AFD, the far-right party, dominates Eastern Germany. That's quite a transformation in 4 years. Now, I wouldn't say the right one because I don't consider the CDU a right-wing party. If you actually take a look at their policies, and basically they are saying that they will never make a coalition with the AFD, they would rather make a coalition with the left. So I honestly consider them just leftists light. All the same, you can see a shift towards the right in German politics that strangely seems to have missed out on both the oldest and the youngest. The oldest people are very much the no change people, right? The SPD and the CDU, which are the center left and center right parties together, make up 67% of the vote there, compared to 25% of the youngest cohort, 18 to 24. Interesting. You can see, of course, that on the younger cohort, the left party has 25% of the vote, far more than their overall total of 6.8%, 6.6, 8.6, what am I reading? 8.6%. So the youngest people are very, very left-wing. On the other hand, if you go just a bit older, 25 to 34, the vote share drops to 15%, a 10% drop, and this mostly goes to right-wing parties. You can see that the same age range has 2% more AfD and 4% more CDU. So that's an interesting phenomenon where the youngest are very, very left-wing. The most right-wing seem to be the 35 to 44, with 26% for AfD and 24% for the CDU party. And you can see that there's basically a loss of trust in the institutions and in the way things are currently being run among all young people, with, like I said, the youngest being very left-wing. I wonder if this is something that will change as they get older. Is it like something inherent that the left manages to appeal more to youngsters, or perhaps that people who are still in the education system tend to be more left-wing because the education system is run by and advocates for leftists? Or is it just that the future of Germany looks to be more left-wing, as in the next generation is also going to be more left-wing? That's going to be interesting to keep note of. Now, like I said, I don't believe that there's actually going to be that big a change in policy for Germany. I do believe that you're going to get the CDU, the center right-wing party, so-called, in my opinion, just leftists, just not as far left as the others. I'm saying that because, like I said, they would never party with the... I mean, how can I call them? Are they right-wing or not? The AFD? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll tell you what I found out trying to look into it, and you'll make up your own mind. But yeah, the CDU will never actually go further right. They will only go more left than their initial positions, and their initial positions aren't that right-wing at all, honestly. They are slightly tougher on migration than the center left, let's say. Apart from that, not much different. Now, the AfD, how are they different from, let's say, the MAGA movement? Basically, they are skeptical of climate science. Of course, on YouTube, we totally believe in climate change. They're heretics. But I think the MAGA movement is largely heretical in that sense as well. So it's not that makes them far-right. Unless you believe the MAGA movement to be far-right, which is interesting because that would make over half the country of the US far-right. So what is it that's actually that much worse about the AfD? Well, they believe in borders, they don't want to become a minority in their own country, they want to get illegal immigrants out, they don't want all the climate stuff, the Green New Deal and stuff. they mainly seem to be different in that they advocate for the native population of Europe, the German ethnic Germans, I mean, to remain a majority in their own country. So even in the US, you don't really see people talking as much about the demographics. I'm not saying they didn't talk at all about it. They are aware of it on the right. I mean, on the left, they actually tell you both that there is no replacement, as well as celebrating the replacement, which is totally not happening in Egypt. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But I did see people like Don Lemon or all sorts of Democrat politicians stand and talk about how, including Biden, incidentally, how white people are going to become a minority in the US soon enough, and that's a good thing. So the Democrats are definitely evil conspiracy theorists on that front, obviously. I don't see the right being as alarmed by the prospect in the US as they are in Europe, and I think it's largely due to the nature of the minorities in their countries. So in the US, you have Hispanics and blacks that have been there for ages now. Not in the same numbers, of course, but I think the white majority doesn't feel as threatened, especially by Hispanics that don't seem to be as foreign and intolerant, let's say, as the Muslim migrants coming into Europe right now. If you notice, Middle East used to be what, 20% Christian. Now it's like 4%. There used to be a Jewish minority in pretty much most Arab countries, but now it's basically gone. And it's not just that they moved to Israel, they were coerced, I can tell you, because my family has stories about being coerced to live Iraq and Iran. And of course, it's the same to other minorities, the Yazidis and so on. Basically, the Muslims have, especially in the last century or so, been exceedingly hostile and intolerant to minorities of all kinds. And now, well, do you really think that it's going to be a different story if they become a majority in your homeland in Europe? I wouldn't bet on it. In fact, I'd bet on the opposite. If I had to bet, I would totally bet on the opposite, on them being very, very prejudiced and cruel. So, the main difference is basically Germany for Germans is the AFD's position on this, and they even flirted with not just deporting illegal immigrants, not just deporting residents, but maybe even deporting citizens who have a migrant background and refuse to assimilate. And these ideas are beyond the scope of the more liberal human rights types, let's say. Essentially, you are harming the human rights of your citizens by taking away the citizenship that way. It's true. I mean, I'd say removing illegal immigrants is not at all harming anyone's human rights. You are just following your own laws and protecting your right to maintain sovereignty in your own homeland. But the left would see this as removing asylum seekers and against human rights. I don't believe in this for a second, because if you notice, the overwhelming majority of these illegal migrants are young military-aged men. If you actually have a dangerous conflict, you'd have the women and children fleeing with the men staying to fight, like in Ukraine. You'll notice that most Ukrainian refugees are either elderly or women, children, and so on, while most immigrants from the Middle East and Africa are young military-aged men. So no, I don't think they're asylum seekers. I don't think it's breaching their human rights to deport them when they're there illegally, or to refuse to, let's say, extend their visas and such if they're residents. That said, taking away citizenship would be beyond the paradigm of liberalism. Now, is there any kind of argument that the right can make to justify what they want to do, the AFD in this case? I'd say the best argument is, well, you brought these people in against our wishes. You didn't have an election where you proclaimed loudly, yeah, I'm going to open the borders, bring tens of millions of people in, change the very fabric of society, make you a minority in your own country, and give these people citizenship. You didn't do that. You didn't have a referendum on it. You didn't run an election based on this. So you did this without the permission of the local populace. And when they started trying to raise this idea that what you are actually doing this and that they don't like it, you basically shut them down, censored them, and called them racist. You threw them in jail for even liking posts about it or making memes about it. So you didn't have the consent of the government, of the governed, the citizens, to do what you did, to allow these people in and give them citizenship. Therefore, what you did is illegitimate. It doesn't bear the authority and approval of the people of the country. You betrayed the people. And so they have a right to undo what you've done if they so choose. That's, I guess, what they would argue. And I'm not saying that this argument has no merit whatsoever. I can see that if you have to choose between breaking with liberal norms and becoming a minority in your own country, quite a few people might choose to break with liberal norms. I've mentioned it before, but if you study history in school here in Israel, you basically focus a lot about what happened to our people, the Jews, during history. Of course, there's also world history, World War II and so on, but there's quite a bit about how the Jews lived as a minority in different countries in the West and in the Middle East and so on. And it wasn't good. It was not good at all. And this has given me a very strong perception that the right to self-determination of peoples should be respected. And that, if possible, every different group, every different people should have their own homeland with their own army, their own currency, their own culture, their own language and religion and so on. And yes, I mentioned army in order for self-protection. I mean, the Jews would have been ended a lot sooner if we didn't have a very strong standing army for our tiny nations, sides at least, here in the Middle East. And seeing the Germans become a minority in their own country absolutely seems awful to me. It seems like a crime against them. And I can understand why. A group that says, well, this is the only way to turn back the clock, so we'll do it even if we don't like it. I can see why that would happen. I'm not 100% on board. I think that it might be possible to turn back the clock in other ways. I think what you'd have to do is tackle both migration, stopping more migration and sending out illegal immigrants, not extending visas and so on for people of foreign background that don't have a very good reason to be in your country, that are not very strong contributing members of it. And then on the other hand, trying to boost the fertility of the local population, because you have a negative fertility for the native Germans. That's another reason why people are predicting them becoming a minority in their own country soon. And how would I make fertility among the native population in Europe in general rise? Well, I'd say that the way that the West raises children is have fewer children but invest a lot in each of them, which means that it's quite expensive to raise children. On the other hand, the way that it's done in Africa or the Middle East is have a lot of children, but minimally invest in each of them. And when the government gives you some amount of money per child, especially for asylum seekers and such, and you are used to living conditions much worse than the West, then it is possible to have children and maybe even many children. On the other hand, due to the harsh economic conditions and the fact that you don't get as much money if you just have, let's say, one child as you do if you have 3, 4, 5 children. It's not as though every family gets a certain allowance and you can choose to invest it in one child or many. No, you get it per child. So as a result, it's much more economically arduous to raise a child the Western way with Western standards. And there's also the fact that health plays a role. Fertility in Western countries is much lower, and it happens to migrants who immigrate there too over time. If you could improve things, like for example deal with the amount of radiation that we have from cell phones and such, because you keep the cell phone next to your genitals in your pocket, right? It's quite close and it has a very deleterious effect. You have a lot of chemicals in the food, in the water, microplastics. You'd be surprised, even in your shampoo, you can have things that inhibit male fertility. If you actually dealt with the economic issues, making it easier for Germans to actually raise children the Western way with high investment by improving the economy and leaving them with more money to save and invest in their family, making it easier for them to own a home, then I think you'd see a rise in fertility rates, yes. And part of that is, incidentally, just rolling back migration. If you don't invite new people to your country in a rate of, let's say, a large city every year, and your fertility rate is low, then you'll find that you have more homes and people to live in them soon enough, which would of course depreciate the value of houses, allowing people to more easily buy a house. On the other hand, if you do keep importing people at an incredible rate, well, these people need a place to live. Fair enough. Also, these people need somewhere to work. Basically, everyone that you're importing it's not a family where, you know, you have grandparents, you have kids, these people probably don't work. Okay, so it's only the parents that go to work. No, you're importing, once again, like 90% or more military-aged men. These people will work, and that means they will compete with the locals for the jobs, depreciating your wages and possibly even pushing you to unemployment. So just dealing with the problems could help alleviate the how to put it, ethnic versus foreign issue for Western societies to an extent. Now, will it still be needed to do deportations? Well, of illegals, of course, and it's not a bad thing. I don't think it's an illiberal thing either. Of legal residents, maybe, possibly. You could also just disincentivize them, but it might be needed. Of citizens of foreign background, that's the kicker. That's where I'm not sure. I think it's a very extreme solution. I'm not saying that it's off the table completely. I can understand that in last ditch effort you might resort to it, but it is stretching the limits of democracy, I think, of not liberal democracy, let's say. The idea of human rights being universal and not just restricted to your own citizens, or rather even to your own people in this case, because you are taking away citizenship from people you already granted to. That's, I suppose, where the AFD gets the moniker far right. And that's where people, even on the right, even the MAGA movement, might be a little squeamish about them. Is it enough to just call them persona non grata? I don't think so. I don't think that the AFD would expect as a hard rule deportations in any coalition. And I think that everything else they say is very much in line with mainstream right-wing thought. Skepticism of supranational bodies like the EU, skepticism of climate change policies because they're climate heretics, wanting closed borders, law and order, speak the language, you know, normal stuff. Yeah, very, very normal. I don't understand why anyone would want to ban the AFD unless, of course, they're authoritarian. I'm sorry. Everything they say is reasonable, let's say. They are not advocating for an offensive position on minorities, which is to say they're not hating on them, they're not advocating violence on them, they're not claiming superiority over them. They are advocating a defensive position. Don't let our people become a minority in our own country. Stop the descent into oblivion. We want to maintain our own culture and people. I don't think that a dangerous, anti-democratic, or, how to put it, immoral party. They reek of desperation, in a sense, for their own people. And I don't think the sentiment wanting to love your country and your people first or best is necessarily bad or wrong. In fact, I think that the sentiment wanting to hate your people and love everyone else seems far more twisted to me. That's the left, by the way. And there's some interesting research on that too. But never mind right now. Yeah, the AFD is interesting. Would I call them a far-right party? To an extent. They're definitely a right-wing party, let's say, which is something I wouldn't call any other party in the German parliament. Mostly, if you look at the CDU and you notice their actions more than their rhetoric even, they really do seem off a feather with the SPD and the rest of the left. That's why they're willing to make a coalition with them but not with the AFD. I can't say that they are special in Europe. You've seen similar sentiments, not from Nigel Farage and his Reform Party in Britain, mind you, but from a lot of the voters, funnily enough. If you listen to the Lotus Eaters, it's a very British broadcast, and they're right wing, then you can notice that they very much are in favor of, let's say, deporting illegal immigrants to start with and closing the borders, which is something that the right-wing party that looks to be the next winner, the Reform Party, isn't really keen on. But on the other hand, they seem to be very popular among the voters, let's say, of the Reform Party. I think there's very much a taboo in politics with talking about borders, about immigration, about the native majority. These are things that if you're on the left, you can boldly proclaim that you are against. I recently saw a video about Ash Sarkar, which is a left-wing talking head on TV in Britain. And she basically openly says that she's a communist, and that, how did she put it? When she talked about London losing 600,000 white people and gaining 1.2 million other migrants, we're winning. That's what she said. So essentially, she is engaged in tribal politics, cheering on her team, which is the non-white team, against the white team. It's fine if you're a leftist. On the other hand, if you're a right-winger and you're cheering the white team, then, well, yeah, that's going to cost you everything. So definitely the far left is very much racial tribal politics, and the far right, so-called, isn't allowed to touch that in most places, and where it does touch that, like in Germany, then the mainstream flirts with banning them. You completely lose out all tolerance from the left. It's just too taboo. I don't think in such an atmosphere it's possible to peacefully solve the problem that native people are becoming a minority in their own country, and they are not happy about it naturally. Their complaints are not being heard. They are not allowed to discuss it. If they try to, they are destroyed. You are very much sowing the wind, and you will reap the whirlwind in my estimates. Not talking about whether it's good or bad, just saying that I think it'll happen. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.